The old wooden clock had hung on Daniel's living room wall for years, a quiet inheritance from his grandfather. It had ticked faithfully through long nights and quiet mornings, but one afternoon, without warning, it simply stopped. The hands froze between 3 and 4, caught in silence. Daniel noticed it only after hours had passed, when the stillness seemed to seep into the room. At first, he thought of fixing it. He reached for the clock, feeling the weight of its wood, polished smooth from his grandfather's careful touch. But instead of rushing to repair it, he found himself staring at it, caught in the strange emptiness of its silence. The house felt heavier, as if the absence of its steady tick had unbalanced something within him. Memories of his grandfather stirred. The man had always lived with quiet discipline, never wasting a moment. He would rise early, tend to his garden, and find time to read, pray, and sit with his family. Daniel had admired him, but never followed in his footsteps. His own life had become a blur of deadlines and routines, a rhythm not guided by meaning but by necessity. The stopped clock, his grandfather's clock, felt like a message left behind, though Daniel couldn't yet read it. He sat down on the couch and stared at the unmoving hands. The silence pressed deeper, until he felt it echo in his chest. A thought crossed his mind, almost like a whisper. How much of his own life had he let slip away unnoticed, ticking second by ticking second? Daniel leaned back, closing his eyes, and felt the weight of years lived without attention. He thought of the countless times he had said later to his wife when she asked for a walk, or tomorrow when his daughter wanted him to play. Later and tomorrow had been his shields, and now they stood like ghosts around him. The clock had stopped, but it was his own life that seemed suddenly suspended in its stillness. He placed the clock back on the wall without fixing it. For reasons he couldn't explain, he wanted it to stay that way for now, frozen like a mirror of his own heart. Something told him this silence was not just emptiness. It was waiting for him to listen. The days that followed carried a strange weight for Daniel. Every time he passed the stopped clock, he felt as though it was staring back at him, daring him to confront something he had long avoided. Its still hands became a quiet reminder that life, too, could pause without warning. He began to notice the small regrets that had accumulated over the years. The way dust gathers in corners until it can no longer be ignored. He remembered birthdays missed because of work, conversations left unfinished with his father, promises to himself that never took root. Each memory was like a faint echo, growing louder in the silence of that broken clock. One evening, as the last light of day fell through the window, Daniel sat beneath the clock and let the memories wash over him. He saw his daughter at 5 years old, tugging at his sleeve, begging him to come outside and chase her through the yard. He had told her he was too tired, that he would join her another day. That day never came. He remembered his wife standing at the kitchen sink, hoping for a word of affection, while he rushed out the door with barely a nod. He thought of his grandfather, sitting on the porch in the twilight, often inviting Daniel to sit beside him. Daniel always said he didn't have time. Now those moments were gone, and the silence of the clock made their absence sharper than ever. The regrets felt like shadows stretching across his mind. Yet within that heaviness, he realized something deeper. Time had always been moving, always slipping through his hands, whether he noticed or not. He had lived as though there would always be more days, more chances, more tomorrows. But the clock on his wall told another story, that the illusion of endless time was the greatest lie he had ever believed. For the first time in years, Daniel allowed himself to cry. The tears were not only for what he had lost, but for what he had ignored, while it was still within reach. The stopped clock seemed to hold all those forgotten moments, as if it had frozen to make him see them clearly. In that silence, he understood. Time was not something to postpone, not something to hoard. It was a gift, fragile and fleeting, and each moment was already a chance to live fully. What mattered now was not the years already gone, but the ones still within his grasp. The morning after his reflection, Daniel woke with a strange clarity. The stopped clock still hung unmoving on the wall, but instead of feeling heavy, it seemed to breathe possibility into the room. He realized it didn't need to tick again for him to start moving. Time outside of it was still flowing, waiting for him to choose how to spend it. He began with small steps. That same evening, when his wife asked if he wanted to walk after dinner, he said yes. They strolled through the neighborhood in the fading light, speaking softly about nothing and everything. It was simple, but Daniel felt as though the air itself had shifted. The ordinary walk became extraordinary simply because he was present for it. The next day, he called his daughter, now grown and living in another city. She was surprised to hear his voice without a reason behind it, no questions, no tasks, just him asking about her day. They talked longer than they had in months. When the call ended, Daniel sat in the silence again. But this time it felt full, like the room itself carried warmth he had forgotten. Days turned into weeks, and Daniel slowly began reclaiming the time he once let slip away. He no longer rushed through his mornings but sat with his coffee, listening to the birds outside his window. At work, he still gave his best, but he no longer sacrificed every part of himself for deadlines that would soon be forgotten. And in the evenings, he began writing something he had dreamed of since he was young but always postponed. His words flowed like water he had been holding back for years. The stopped clock remained on the wall, unchanged. Visitors sometimes asked why he hadn't fixed it, and Daniel would simply smile. To him, it was no longer broken. It had become a teacher, a silent companion reminding him that time's true value wasn't in its endlessness, but in the way he chose to live each moment. One night, as he turned off the lights, Daniel stood beneath the clock and whispered a quiet thank you, not just to the clock, but to his grandfather, to the memories, and to life itself. He knew time would continue its march, whether he noticed or not. But now, instead of fearing its passage, he welcomed it. For the first time in years, Daniel felt alive, not just existing but living, deeply aware that each breath was a gift. The clock had stopped, but within Daniel, a new rhythm had begun. Life often teaches us through silence, through the things that no longer move. Daniel's story reminds us that time is not a guarantee but a fragile offering. The stopped clock showed him that tomorrow is never promised, yet today is always within reach. Perhaps this story is also a mirror for us, to notice where we have delayed love, postponed dreams, or silenced joy. Time will not wait, but we can choose to embrace it now. If this story touched you, share it with someone you care about, and remember to like, comment, and subscribe for more.